morning, everybody. Thank you very much for being here and welcome to Experts Speak. It's lovely here today, actually, to be with both Anuradha and Saurabh on the second edition of Experts Speak, the topic of which is going to be the future of work. And the context really is this last 1 year of transformation. Yeah. And in this last 1 year, individuals and organizations have really had to reimagine how we live, how we work, how we learn and communicate, but also how we create balance and make time for our own wellness, mental and physical wellness, right? And despite so much difficulty and so much trauma and so many challenges, I think many have seen in this a remarkable spirit of resilience, a remarkable degree of flexibility and agility and adaptability as different groups of people found ways to come out of this with a degree of positivity. And so with this backdrop, I think what we'll talk about today amongst the three of us is what we believe is the future of work in the context of this pandemic, and where we think it's going to go from here. How we all believe that organizations can become more resilient in such a time of change. So let's dive straight in. I want to ask Anuradha and Saurabh both, perhaps Saurabh, you could go first, is what you think about the post-pandemic workplace. Specifically, what do you think has changed due to this remote hybrid work, and what do you think is going to remain to stay?
So thanks, Ira. Thanks, and lovely being on this discussion. And as you said, we are all learning every day. Last 18 months have been very different for all of us. But one thing which I think is going to stay as we move forward is flexibility. I think all of us have experienced flexibility. So that is one which is going to stay. Second is what is going to stay for us is leveraging technology. I think technology will become a big player in our, it is, and it will only further enhance in terms of which is there. What will it entail? What tomorrow is, we are all grappling with, and there are thoughts. We'll have to see how it pans out. Again, 2 or 3 learnings for us. One learning has been that in this world today, it's not one size fits all. So it'll be a Wipro point of view across the globe, because there are few things very country specific that are going to happen. The way the pandemic is rolling out across different parts of the world, so it's going to be very differently done. However, there will be a common thread across. Second, we believe is that cultures and organizations get created when people come together. Remote working and hybrid working, they are two very different things. And how do you bring that together? So one is we all work remote. 97% of Wipro's employee is working remotely. But working remotely and working hybrid is different. And how do we make that? In fact, somebody said, today it's a flat world. Everybody's working remote. In a hybrid, how do we make that? And it's not going to be a flat world. And how do we make that happen? And that's a critical one. The third, which is what we are learning, is in our experience has been in terms of how will people take it, and it is very different for different people. Some are wanting the continued flexibility, some are wanting to come back, and some are wanting something in between. And it's different because of the personal choices people have, the difference in the different stages of life their people are. So I'll pause here, but this is the framework which we are right now looking at it, that flexibility is here to stay. How do we make that use of flexibility is something which we will see as we go forward.
Very well said. Thank you, Saurabh. Flexibility as technology, and I love the way hybrid is different and remote is different, right? I think that's an important one. And no one size fits all across countries, because I know Anuradha also manages a bunch of countries, but not like Wipro, who manages all the countries out of India, which is a very interesting challenge. Anu, what about you?
I think, look, a lot of similarities to what Saurabh has said, but I really look at it as boundarylessness. it's almost like breaking down of walls, both the physical and the metaphorical. Obviously, the most obvious one being no more offices, you work virtually. But I think it's also about how offices will be in the future, where we will use them much more for collaboration, the way we design offices, so boundarylessness in that physical sense of the term. But also, I think boundarylessness amongst teams, because if there's one thing we've learned, it's the power of agility and collaboration. And so I see much more organizations and leaders using people in an agile way, prioritizing the most critical imperatives in a very flexible flow to value, flow to work. And so I really see that kind of boundarylessness being all pervasive. The second thing is really a changed workforce, which we are talking about, because the one thing we know is that the people who went away are not the people who are coming back. And there is this prioritization of, what I want now, life is too short, focus on my family. You see a lot of this coming up, and it will continue to change. I mean, the pandemic is not yet behind us. And I think this changed workforce who has each experienced this pandemic differently is going to lead to a lot of ask for flexibility and personalization in the way people want to adopt hybrid or what they want to make of their careers. And I think that is with a big focus on health, well-being. I think these are trends which are absolutely here to stay. For me, I think another very important one will be, of course, digital transformation, everything based on, what is a consumer trend today is an employee trend tomorrow, the need to be far more efficient, effective. And I think the largest one is, in general, the need for inclusion and taking everyone along, because we will only be as strong as the weakest link. And with everybody working remotely or in different places, if we are not able to get that inclusive spirit going, we will lose the next decade. And therefore, these are some of the trends that I see.
So, Ira, how do you reimagine the balance between productivity, flexibility, collaboration in this new world of work? How do we strike a balance between all this, and how is it playing out for you? Any experiences you can share, Ira?
If you think about flexibility, productivity, and collaboration, it's a very interesting concept, right? Because earlier productivity was so important, and I think the whole concept of efficiency was so important. But I think increasingly one of the lessons of the pandemic is that efficiency isn't enough. It's also about flexibility and collaboration, and how we are going to be able to create effectiveness in a world where there is remote and physical work in that truly hybrid workplace. And one of the interesting things, at least that we are thinking about, is in a study that we did, we found that about 3 out of 4 employees in India want more flexible work options. But 73% also want more in-person time with their teams. Now, how do you balance that? You want to work remotely, but you also want in-person time, and it's almost the same percentage. So what we are thinking about is digital technology to truly empower a workforce in the way that they need to work, to collaborate, to be creative, to build community, right? That's really important. And so we're trying to figure out ways to reimagine the work experience. So a few things we're thinking about, right? And I'll just maybe pick up some of the themes you spoke about. I think you spoke about inclusion. Yeah. And inclusion is a very big part of our culture. And so we're thinking a lot about inclusion of people with disabilities. Yeah. And so how can we embrace more people with disabilities in a hybrid work environment? Yeah. And how can we make technology design at the inception itself to be disability friendly? So for example, we have closed captions in Teams, right? We have immersive readers, which helps people to read out some of the syllables of an email. We have customized reading experiences for people with different cognitive abilities. So we're trying to make sure that these are not bolt-ons. We are trying to make sure that this is all design and inception stage product creation, right? The other thing that we are trying to do is, both of you talked about boundarylessness and collaboration. Yeah. And when I think of that in a virtual environment, it's very difficult. So we're encouraging a lot of role modeling from managers and leaders. We are encouraging a lot of role modeling around how to give people the space to create their own versions of virtual teams. Yeah, so different people use different, for example, teams together modes on teams. We're encouraging managers and leaders to be much more empathetic to the way people want to take time off, because if a leader takes time off, then your role modeling and the employee can take time off. So we're encouraging a lot more role modeling. We're encouraging a lot more of that sort of work, and we're trying to use a lot of data. We have access to a lot of data, right? Through Microsoft 365, through LinkedIn. And so we're using a lot of data and trying to leverage analytics and insights to be able to help not only HR but business leaders take decisions for better work-life balance, for balancing that with customer focus, to get greater agility, right? And so we're trying to use analytics to measure changes in work pattern, to measure, for example, how manager engagement influences individual engagement, and provide that insight to ensure that efficiency, effectiveness is all sort of taken care of. Because at the end of the day, in the hybrid work, it's going to be technology which is a key enabler for organizations, right? As we make sure that inclusion and effectiveness really go hand in hand. I've spoken a little bit about leadership, and I did want to hear, Anuradha, your points of view on culture and leadership, because those are very different now in this world to support employees.
The first thing I want to say about leadership is that, the too often the narrative around change is one around fear or negativity or pessimism. But just as change represents, the uncertainty of not knowing what the future holds, I think there is also the excitement of opportunity. And the biggest role of leadership is in framing a positive narrative and an optimistic narrative around change and the future. Even as leaders don't know what lies ahead, but standing for that optimism and standing for that positive narrative of the future will actually make or break what the culture that we shape in the future. I think in terms of what leaders can do, I think the biggest thing is really around employee listening, and we have really stepped up employee listening in every manner because everybody has their own reality, and therefore the solution that works for one will not, and therefore a leadership that is focused on making an individual feel like you are the one and this is the solution for you, and I can lead a team where there are different needs and different motivations for people. Being able to live in a future that has seeming paradoxes, because on one hand we talked about teams are going to be less proximate, but we're going to have to drive for much more collaboration. Or the fact that on one hand employees want much more support and care from the organization when it comes to health and well-being, but we are also seeing them start to say, give us the freedom to choose our passions, give us the flexibility to shape our own careers. So there are a lot of paradoxes that we as leaders are going to have to play for. And in this leadership, I think there is something about framing or co-creating a future together, not sort of being the leader who has all the answers, but galvanizing energy by saying that, we create the future together. And I think that will unlock a lot more collaboration and a lot more norms of what the team will be like. Hundreds of thousands of people who have joined organizations at a time of the pandemic are really struggling to feel assimilated, and leadership has a big role in this. And in, I think, role modeling that vulnerability, role modeling that self-care, and saying it is okay to not be okay. I also think that we have to equip leaders because they don't have all the answers. And therefore, one of the things that we have done is leader check-in circles, where we have equipped our leaders to get energy from peers, and just talking about the shared experience and learning of the pandemic. And that again is sort of giving way to this new power or new way of shared leadership. And another thing about the culture going ahead is, like I said, is really a dissipation of power, because it's not like there are few who have the answers or the ability to give support. And we have created an initiative called Mental Health Champions, who are basically employee volunteers who actually take on the role of being a well-being coach or support to their peers. And we have 700 of them in the organization, and we want to have many, many more. And they are sort of the first port of call, someone you can speak to, if someone who's non-threatening, that first step between calling a helpline, and if you do feel like, talking to your leader will make you feel judged. So I think this whole notion of that the leadership lies in the collective. And in doing all of this, I think we will shape the culture. The culture will be a result of what we do now. But I wanted to actually switch gears and hear from you, Ira, on what you are doing to drive inclusion and well-being, and what your thoughts are on what the future holds in this regard.
I think I was taking notes as you spoke, because at the end of the day, there is so much that we can learn from each other, because inclusion and well-being have really become so much more critical than they ever were in the past. And I think it's not only a realization amongst HR, it's really a wellspring of what we are hearing from leaders and managers and employees. And one of the realizations, at least, that we have had is, again, we use a lot of data, and one of the things we've realized is in India, and this is market, it's not Microsoft, almost 60% of employees feel overworked because digital intensity has increased. And almost 2/3 again of employees are saying we're feeling like we want to work more flexibly. But managers are saying, how do I balance inclusion, the point that we made at the beginning, between people who are with me in the room physically and people who are going to continue to be with me in the room on a Teams call? How do I balance inclusion? How do I retain equal experience, right? And make sure that every voice is heard. And every voice is important. In a world where inclusion is assuming so much importance, inclusion in a hybrid environment is a new animal for all of us for whom culture is so important, right? And so at least when we think about inclusion, we're thinking about it from a few lenses. We're thinking about it from the lens of empathy. We're thinking about it from the lens of flexibility. We're thinking about it from the lens of the role that leaders play in role modeling inclusion. We're thinking about it in the role that managers play when they give grace and they assume positive intent, so that people feel that they have the space to be who they want to be and who they need to be in a hybrid context, right? So we've done, a lot of things around mental wellness and so on, which have, I think, increasingly inspired us to start thinking about, in fact, the advantages that hybrid has provided. Because what we found is that over exactly double the number of people have availed counseling during the lockdown than did before. 75% more people in Microsoft, right, have downloaded mental wellness resources from the website because it's much easier when it's anonymous. And so we found that the people need to leverage mental wellness resources, and they need it more in the pandemic, and they are finding it, the anonymity of the pandemic is a valuable tool for them to be able to engage with some of that work, right? But on the other hand, it's also important to take the stigma away when you start thinking about mental wellness. And so one of the things we did early on was we renamed our sick leave as sick and mental wellness leave. And so you're trying to equate physical well-being with mental well-being, and we found so much uptake on leave because people are taking leave just because there's anxiety and they need to take care of their own. It's little symbols which indicate that, the way the organization thinks about something. There were so many women who were worried that, what about my child? Childcare centers are closed, schools are closed. I have to take care of unwell in-laws or unwell parents, or, I have obligations at home. And so we introduced a 12-week pandemic school closure leave for mothers or parents of children who needed to be with their kids as their schools closed. And we found so much uptake on that. We've introduced caregiver leave in case you have unwell family at home you need to take care of. Now, these are realities in the pandemic. And in my own mind, I'm thinking that maybe some of this is actually lessons well learned in this environment, which are actually some reasons for us to be grateful because they have pushed us forward in our thinking on some very critical aspects of inclusion. And things like women coming back to work. We have a springboard program for women who took a career break. We've never had more women coming back to work than we have now. We're exploring many more people with disabilities joining the workforce because in a hybrid environment, it's easier. So there's a lot of insights around purpose that the pandemic has brought as we thought through inclusion. So
This is
those
very, if I summing it up, just thinking what both of you said, the few things we have got, one is we spoke about resilience. Ira, you spoke about it. The empathy, you spoke about it. I like the way Anu said, it's okay not being okay. And I think that's very powerful. These are things which we'll all have to live with as we move. I give an analogy of cricket here, where I believe that it's for a T20. It's a 5-day match. There will be sessions where you'll do well and you not do well and stuff, and how resilient you are, and all of us have to learn to live with that. But you're true. But so much of data and insights really it's helpful to see what we can actually do for people.
it does, and at the end of the day, I think it's culture. At least in our case, right? It's the culture of the organization. It's the growth mindset to say things are changing. I have to learn as I do that. It's the ability to say managers and leaders must model, but also they must coach and they must care at these times. These are things which are really important. But I do want to ask you actually one more question, Saurabh, which is I think about the scale of Wipro and the fact that you're managing, you said, right, there's no one size fits all for companies across the world. And as you think about some of these challenges and balancing the productivity flexibility that we spoke about, what are your thoughts on that across this scale that you're looking at?
So, two things. One is technology has been a big enabler in the entire process, for us. Both for the entire life cycle, if I say from hire to retire of an employee, we've been able to deploy technology at every level. And one thing which we have been doing, we have made it very much more personal. When we are looking at helping people during COVID, there were different menu of things, and individuals could choose what they wanted. For some people, somebody wanted leave, somebody wanted money, a loan, somebody wanted stuff, school. So people could choose. So I'm saying it could become very personalized. Technology enable you to become personalized. But whilst I say this, there is a group of people who also believe, as exactly the way you said, 75% also want to come and meet their co-workers. People still believe that there is nothing like coming face to face, and they're missing it. Especially for us, in an industry with their of churn, 27% of Wipro's workforce in the last 18 months is new. So for them who have not been to a Wipro office, who have not met their manager, who have not met their team members, how do we collaborate in the best of technology? How do we bring in productivity? Because they don't know each other, and I think that is becoming a challenge. So for the old timers, it's fine, but people coming in new, or you onboarding them, and that's the diagram. Technology big enabler, but coming back to work also key requirement. And how do we bridge these two in the scale of the organization is something which we are grappling with.
Thank you. I really appreciate that insight because at the end of the day, it's scale and speed. And one of the things we found is the ability of the organization to be flexible, to be adaptable, and to have speed for scale, which is going to make it possible for employees to reinvent themselves in this new world of work.
We are technology companies era where it is easier for us to have
Yes.
people working remotely. But for Anu, it's factories and products and it's consumer and how is that playing, because there are different groups within that organization.
But
Lights, throw lights.
yeah, I think that our factories and frontline have shown really remarkable resilience. And I was thinking what drives that. I think it's this, when we dial up pride and purpose, we supply essential goods. And therefore, knowing that if we don't make, hygiene products, if we don't make the products that give nutrition to millions, then, we are not playing our part. And I think dialing up that pride and purpose has been a big part of our sort of engagement with our employees. And I think doing it proactively has really helped us during this pandemic to drive resilience. And I find that each employee in Unilever, we invest, 3-4 hours with each person on what we call discover your leadership purpose. And that's not just about the what of your work, but how and why, and what's the unique legacy that you want to leave behind, right down to the blue collared employees who've been through these, and they write letters to themselves and carry them in their pockets. And I think it's this sense of purpose and pride which has kept people going, and which has really made them contribute beyond the ordinary in this time.
No, I think that's well said. I think, whether it's purpose and pride or meaning and culture and mission of companies, at the end of the day, when people can't come together, it's got to be something bigger, something
Agree.
more meaningful, something more purposeful that holds organizations and the individuals within organizations to a higher degree of elevated delivery, right? And so I do want to, just as we close this conversation, get a sense from you of what do you think. We've talked about purpose and pride and culture and meaning, but apart from that, what do you think is going to be important to continue to be resilient? Because we haven't seen the back, sadly, of the pandemic. And so, what do you think is going to be important to continue to be resilient and to ride out what is to come in the future?
Yeah, I think I'll start with myself, and then sort of extrapolate to the organization what we are doing, because we've spoken at length about the well-being and inclusion support that we are all working towards. But I think what's focused sort of me is I've also had moments where I felt, oh, how do I lead for this context which I was absolutely not prepared for. But I think again, reframing my leadership purpose, which has really allowed me to think, if that leadership purpose is about unlocking the best of people, let me unlock the best of people and help people thrive in this very uncharted terrain. But also, I think being very clear about what I can control and what I can't control. Initially, of course, we've all been through the months of craziness, the second wave, but really being able to sharply prioritize for myself and my team, and then almost creating a little bit of space for chaos, knowing that things are not going to plan. So plan extensively, but know that things are not going to go for plan, and therefore don't get upset when things don't turn out exactly as they are. Make space for chaos. The third is, I think, doing things or drawing boundaries around the things that are really important, whether it's family time, it's weekend time, small rituals that one can meaningfully sustain. And these are some of the things that have worked for me. Sort of drawing the analogy to the organization, in addition to everything that we've spoken on well-being, and being inclusive, I really, like I said, and the dialing up the purpose and pride part, I would say one is giving people the sense that we're equipping them for the future. And this is the theme of our discussion today, which is the future of work. And so we are actually working with our people on future fit plans, which is what are skills of the future and how do we equip you to be fit in the future in career paths which may not be linear, which may be more like a beehive, but how do we equip people? And so we want every individual to have a future fit plan. Similarly, helping people galvanize the spirit of contribution. Very often I feel stronger when you are able to help others. So whether it's programs like the mental health champion. So what we did in the second wave was we have a program called Nightingales, where over 130 employees volunteered to act as an extension of the medical team who could just not cope with the burden of cases. And these were people who looked out for families, helped with vaccination and resources. And I think a combination of all this and doing it sustainably will help drive resilience.
Few things to add, not add, but saying differently. Uh, we continue to be resilient. We have to continue to be more empathetic, and empathy will look at all the things which Anu said, all those things, or being a caregiver, being a nightingale, being, being a mental health warrior, all those things. And the point Ida you had made other day was about giving hope that things will, as a leader, that it's not all doom and gloom. Things will come out, and we have to be giving hope to our teams, to our colleagues, that there'll be a better world tomorrow. And I think these two very clearly put together is making each of our leaders becoming more resilient. You know, I can give many examples of how we're doing it, but empathy and hope are the two things, pillars on which an individual can become more and be at it. And we have to be genuine. We could be with the sense, purpose, belongingness anyway. These are the two attributes every leader, tomorrow's leader, will be required to have for us to brave this new world.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that. Thank you, both of you. This was lovely because, at the end of the day, my belief has always been that who we choose to be will define what we do. And I think organizations who realize that who they choose to be from the perspective of what are we proud of? What is our purpose? What is our meaning? What culture do we want to live every day? Do we want to be the company that gives hope, as you said, right? Do we want to be the organization that demonstrates empathy and grace? As if we keep those big pillars in mind, programs and policies and interventions will follow. I'm really enthused to hear the degree of thought leadership around the most important principles of how, rather than just the what. So I think that's lovely because we do have to start thinking about how organizations will build capital, social capital, knowledge capital, human capital in completely different ways. Because at the end of the day, I think people are going to need to be the center of workplace experiences. That is going to be the future of work. But thank you, everybody. Really appreciate your time.